This presentation is part of the academic webinar series of the International Center on Nonviolent Conflict. To view a full catalog of our past and upcoming webinars, please visit www.nonviolent-conflict.org and click on Learning and Resources. Today's webinar is called Civil Resistance 2.0, Digital Enhancements to the 198 Nonviolent Methods, and it's going to be delivered by Joyce, a researcher and consultant in global digital activism and the editor of Digital Activism Decoded. So, Joyce is an expert in international digital activism and is the co-founder of the Digital Activism Research Project at the University of Washington. She pursues an integrated practice of collaboration with activists and academics, as well as working to elucidate the field for the general public. She edited the 2010 anthology Digital Activism Decoded, blogs at www.meta-activism.org, and gives talks around the world at events like Personal Democracy Forum, Republica, and Ciudadano 3.0. She is also an occasional digital activism practitioner, most recently as New Media Operations Manager for President Obama's 2008 campaign. From 2010 to earlier this year, she was founder and executive director at the Meta Activism Project, a digital activism think tank, originator of such projects as the Global Digital Activism Dataset, an open list of 1,255 cases of digital activism from 144 countries. Mary is an MA, PhD student in communications at the University of Washington. And with that, I will hand it over to Mary.
Thank you very much, Jake. Hello, everyone. So I'm actually going to ask you to try to use the chat so I can just ask a question and get feedback. So I believe the chat window, the icon is that it looks like a little text box. You don't see it on my screen. I'm not sure why. But I'd like to know how you self-identify for the purposes of this webinar. So if you are an academic, if you are an activist, if you are just an interested citizen, and if you could, I don't know, Jake, maybe you can help with the logistics of how people can type that information into the chat.
Sure. If you look on the right side of your screen, you'll be able to see a small chat box that just type in entire audience and everyone can see your responses.
Okay. Which box is the chat? I see this here, but I don't it's not doing anything when I click on it.
It looks like most people are answering in the questions panel, so if you open that up, you can see.
Oh, okay. Okay, let me see what happens when that does. Okay. All right. Can you send them through to me, or can you or if you can see them? Actually, Jake, since you can probably see all the questions, do you want to just give me a sense of how people are answering?
Sure. We've got some lawyers, professors, activists. Another couple of professors, consultants, quite a few academics and educators, a couple students.
Okay. All right. Good. So, so I think the presentation is pretty much going to be targeted correctly. So, Civil Resistance 2.0 is the topic of this talk, and it is a project to consider the effect of digital technology on Gene Sharp's 198 nonviolent methods. And most of you are probably aware of what this is, but as you can see on the screen to the left is an example of some of them. And these are different ways of using a variety of tools and behaviors in order to create nonviolent change. So also I think Gene Sharp is probably familiar to most people. If not, this is just a very brief introduction to him. He's a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, an activist, a scholar. I think the most influential living theorist of nonviolent struggle. He's certainly one of them. And in 1973, he created this canonical list of 198 methods of nonviolent action that was actually an outgrowth of his PhD dissertation. So that is the starting point of this project, is this list of methods. Coming to this list is myself and my collaborator, Patrick Meier. Patrick is currently the Director of Social and Humanitarian Innovation at the Cutter Foundation. He got his PhD at Tufts University, and he researches digital technology and nonviolence in repressive regimes. And as you heard, I'm the co-founder of the Digital Activism Research Project. I'm currently a graduate student, and I study digital activism in resource-constrained societies. So the goal of the project is to meld digital tools, which are new, with nonviolent methods, which have been in practice since before they were codified in 1973, and which have been in reflective use for the past more than 40 years. So before I go into the project, though, I just wanted to give a couple of warnings, and this is mostly for people who are activists on the call. The first thing is about activist security, which is that one should not attempt digital activism without first considering the political conduct of one's own country. And briefly, why is digital activism of a particular danger? So the bottom line is the public nature of social media and the connectedness of social media. So if you do something online, particularly on something like Facebook or on Twitter, you're revealing yourself and your political views, and you're also revealing who you're connected to. So you could potentially endanger yourself, but also people that you are friends with or who you follow, because repressive governments are getting very good not only at doing network analysis of activists online, but also cracking their passwords and linking their accounts to physical locations. And the bottom line here is when they do that, they can identify you and harm you in the physical world. So it's quite serious. So what I would suggest, though, is not don't be a digital activist, but be informed and be savvy. So two places to get information about being more secure activist is, and you can Google these. The first is Digital Security for Activists by an organization called Rise Up, and the second one is Protecting Your Security Online by Access. Both very reputable, and also because the tactics of repression are evolving just like the tactics of activism. In order to be a digital activist in a repressive regime, it means constantly being aware of these innovations in repression. So I won't say anything more about that, but it's important. The second thing is this idea of networked authoritarianism. So this is the idea that while activists are using digital tools to change the power structure, and that's the focus of my project, repressive governments are also using the same tools to prevent that change, right? Which is kind of not surprising. It's, throughout the history of nonviolence, there has been this kind of cat and mouse game, as Patrick refers to it, groups of people trying to change the status quo and groups of people trying to maintain it. And there's this nice three-part typology of networked authoritarianism, digital repression, that I will just briefly share. So the first method of digital repression is censorship, which is most common in the Middle East and China. Surveillance, which is basically the danger to activists that I discussed before. And there's a chilling effect there where you're not even going to take action because of fear of surveillance, and then there's also the physical harm that results from surveillance. Again, this is most common in the Middle East and China. And then the third is propaganda, which is the government using social media to make the status quo appear more appealing to their citizens. And this is particularly a popular technique in the former Soviet Union. More information on this, I recommend Rebecca McKinnon Katie Pierce, who's an academic, and Evgeny Morozov, you're probably all familiar with. He has a very well-read book. This is his typology, actually. So, with those caveats in mind, why would Patrick and I still pursue this project? If digital activism is dangerous, if digital technology is being used by authoritarian regimes, why are we still so keen on understanding and promoting it? And the bottom line for me is that nonviolence is already digital. So, whether or not we as scholars of nonviolence want to think about digital technology, activists in the field are already using it. And that activists will benefit if digital practices are analyzed by experts in nonviolence, which is why I'm here speaking to you about this project. My ulterior motive is to encourage you to participate in this project that I'll be talking about. So, without further ado, I encourage everyone to follow me to the project page, which is bit.ly/civilresistance, and there's also a link from the registration page. So this is what it looks like if you're not there already. It's a Google Doc. It's really simple, which is the goal, is to make it easy to read, easy to access, easy to edit. So this is the home page, which you're probably seeing right now. And then it's the 198 methods are divided on tabs using the organizational system of Gene Sharp, which is protest and persuasion, non-cooperation, and intervention. Now, this is also an open-sourced project. So if you click on something, you will be able to automatically edit it. And the reason that Patrick and I did this is because we believe that this is a body of knowledge that no 2 people or 3 people or 4 people can master. But that understanding the effect of digital technology on this phenomena is going to be best captured if a large group of people participate with their experience and their insight. And so if you do want to add something to this project, please just on the first page list yourself under contributors. And you can see that there are already a couple of people from ICNC that have done this. Also, in terms of spam or things like that, the page, a wiki, can be reverted to any historical form. So even if it's completely deleted, the information can be gained back. That's important to mention. Okay, so a brief tour. This is the first page of methods, protest and persuasion. And the organization is, the first column is method 1.0, which is Sharp's original method. It's just the name of the method. The second column is technical enhancements to that method. So how technology can amplify or facilitate the organization of a method in its original offline form. The third column is method 2.0, which we've defined as how technology has created a new form of the method. And we're defining new form as a version of the method that exists in a different medium. And then the final is recommendations for implementation. So an example, the first method is public speeches. So the original enhancements would be distributing digital recordings of the speech that occurs offline, and that could be done by a YouTube video, live tweeting the speech, putting a text transcript on a blog or website, or a podcast, actually something that's not on there. So if someone wants to add podcast, you would just put 2 /, your initials, and then write podcast, or anything else you want to write. I trust you. So then for method 2.0, it is a speech that exists only online. And an example here is there's this, I guess, it's an online network of people called Anonymous, and they had a campaign against the Church of Scientology, and they created a video that is basically a voice speaking their position, which in my mind is a speech, but it never existed offline. It's not a person speaking the words, it's a computer program speaking the words. So it's a speech that exists only online. And you can Google it. If you Google the words "We Are Legion" or Scientology on on YouTube, you'll find it. And then for this example, additional recommendations would be that organizers should design speeches for their digital life and have dissemination plans. Another thing I want to mention is that this is not just good news. It's not just, oh, this is great and this is great, and there's also caveats to all these things. So 43, for example, public warning, there's this note and additional recommendations to get permission from people before publishing videos, close-ups, or still images of them, because publicizing their participation could put them in danger. So all of these things, it's a double-edged sword. You can gain influence by dissemination, but also endanger people by dissemination of information. Okay. So these are some kind of summaries of the findings of the project so far. So with regard to enhancement, of the 54 methods of protest and persuasion, there were only 2 for which we could not find digital enhancements. And that doesn't mean that they're not possible. It just means that we couldn't think of them. So protest and persuasion is heavily influenced by digital technology, because digital technology, particularly social media, is a means of disseminating information and opinion, which is very important to these methods. The sections on non-cooperation and intervention have received fewer notes, and I think this might also just be a function of people start on the first tab and they never make their way to the next 2. But also a reason why I think there is less effective digital technology on non-cooperation and intervention is, is because they require direct engagement with power structure, and that the power structures are still offline. However, I will say that coordination of most of these methods could be facilitated by a variety of technologies such as SMS, email, chat, so that even if the non-cooperation or intervention was taking place offline, that coordination could occur digitally. And also there are some examples like the boycott that can be carried out online, especially if it's a digital service that the boycott is seeking to affect. The next thing I'm going to talk about, and this will take the remainder, basically the presentation, is new forms of nonviolence. So, yes, right. So because non-cooperation and intervention require direct engagement. Oh, this is what I already said. Actually, but this is another good example to say that online extensions can occur, such as a denial of service. So boycott would be an example of non-cooperation and intervention. A denial of service attack, which is basically when a website is artificially flooded with requests, fake requests. So if someone is legitimately seeking to get information from a website, they can't get through. And that's actually quite common. And it's especially against government websites. So this is the slide I thought I was on. 10 new methods. So we think that we have found 10 new methods of nonviolence that are not included within the 198 that are already there. So I'm going to present them, and then I would be interested to know if you agree with our position that these are in fact new, and that they're not just new forms of methods already identified by Sharp. So they are maps and activism, QR codes, digital file sharing, nonviolent media hijacking, trending a hashtag, influencing search engine results, live streaming, check-ins, self-surveillance, and flash mobs. So maps and activism, this is basically referring to the fact that there are maps are now digital, which means that they can be information can be both added to them and they can be accessible from a variety of digital devices. So they're also an example of how the digital can link the physical and local to the global and the virtual, right? An example here is using the platform Ushahidi, which Patrick also worked for in the past, using this digital map to identify document sexual violence in Syria. And this is disseminating information in a way that has happened before, but this particular method, I believe, is new. QR codes, you've probably seen them around. Basically, the way that they work is you take a picture of them with your smartphone, and the phone interprets the code. It's basically a barcode, and the phone will take some action, such as it's like a direction to your phone. So it will maybe go to a website, for example. So if you say, learn more about us, you take a picture of the QR code software in your phone will then direct you to the website. And this is just something that did not exist in 1973. So that's what makes it new. And it links, again, the physical offline space with the mobile and the web space. And I'm underlining this just to say that this isn't all offline. It isn't all disconnected from reality, that the world of bits and the world of atoms are actually quite well integrated at this point. So the third method is using digital file sharing platforms. So this one is eMule. Another one is Napster. I think there's one called Kazaa. And these are often used, quite frankly, for illegal file sharing. But they're also really in very common use, particularly by young people all over the world, for sharing like movies and songs. So if young people are using these technologies to share, a copy of the Iron Man movie, they could also be using this technology to share a tactical manual of nonviolence, right? And I suggest using this because it's already accessible and familiar to the audience, right? It's just repurposing it. Nonviolently hijacking media is basically taking advantage of the fact that a lot of institutions of power have presences on online platforms that are interactive. And this is a similar idea to the sit-in of taking control of the space of the opponent, but it's in a digital way. So these are examples of posts on the Wells Fargo Bank page on Facebook. And so they're using the Wells Fargo Bank page, which Wells Fargo set up to promote themselves and engage with clients, to publicly criticize the company. And there's other examples of this, but I will move along. All right. The next one is trending a hashtag. So basically, in Twitter, if you have a keyword and you put the hash symbol in front of it, it becomes a hashtag, and it also becomes a link. So if you click that link, if you click, for example, hash Gaza, you would see everyone who's talking about hash Gaza. And if there are many, 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 many people using this hashtag, it becomes a trend, a trending topic, which you can see on the left. So, well, sometimes this happens organically, that people just happen to all be talking about Girls Aloud, which is, a pop group. Then you can have a trending hashtag, but you can also say, okay, please retweet this, use the hashtag to actually increase awareness of your topic. And this is a Gaza example. I think I took this screenshot, I guess, a couple of weeks ago when that was going on. And you can see that the top news is actually quite different from the top tweets. So you can use Twitter in this way to create a public counter-narrative of conflict. I guess we can talk about more if people are interested in the Gaza example at the end, but I will continue. This is similar. This is a similar idea. So basically using systems that are designed to reveal salient information by the volume of people that are talking about it or linking to it can be gamed or manipulated if many people consciously organize themselves to link to something or to use a hashtag. So this is an example from Google that you can actually determine the search results of a given term. And the most famous example of this is miserable failure, which some activists linked to a page on George W. Bush. So this method is also called a Google bomb in the context of Google specifically, and so you can learn how it works. It's in this example is a public satire, and also it's often safer than other methods because you can link to it without revealing your identity, which is different than personally speaking or tweeting something on social media. The next method is live streaming. So this guy is called Tim Pool. I don't know, American audience members might know of him. He's basically he's a citizen journalist, and he covered the Occupy protests is where he gained his name. And he basically went around to protest and live streamed video from them. And he also tweets. And he's became like a one-person alternative media source. And it does require quite a bit of time and energy, but this is something that is an accessible method to anyone who's willing to go into a protest or whatever method it is or whatever tactic that one wishes to focus attention on. One can live stream it and broadcast it. The next one is Checkins. So this is Foursquare is one technology that allows one to check in digitally to a physical location. And this is an example from the Arab Spring. Lula Roundabout is in Bahrain. That was also Pearl Roundabout, if you have some mental images of that. Actually, the Pearl is in the photos, if you look on the bottom right. So one thing to do is to go to a protest and check in so your friends know you're there. And they say, oh, well, Sarah's there. I could go too. Another way to do this is to check in and leave. So you would have this online, you would see all these people at the protest checking in, but they wouldn't be physically in the space. And this could be much safer if, for example, people that were congregating in public might be physically harmed. Just as digital technology can be used by repressive regimes, the methods of repressive regimes can be used by activists, right? So it's not just, the appropriation is not only going one way. And one example of this is self-surveillance. So this is something that Ai Weiwei has done, and he is the victim of surveillance by the Chinese government. But he decided to draw attention to their practice and delegitimize it by surveilling himself. So he's basically saying, I see you watching me, and everyone else sees you watching me. This guy is probably the best digital activist in the entire world, so if it sounds like a cool and an effective tactic, then that's why. He's really, really good. So basically what he did is he set up a video camera so people could surveil him through the internet at any time. And there's just one more tactic, which is the flash mob. And it is a protest, but it's a form of protest that basically the idea is using mostly SMS, although you can also use email or social media to mobilize a protest more quickly than the authorities can stop it. And this is a well-known example from Belarus in 2006 where they mobilized young people to eat ice cream in a public place. So this is also an excellent example of a dilemma action, because obviously, as you can see in the lower right, when the police came in to remove them from the square, they looked like idiots and thugs because these kids were eating ice cream, right? So those are the new methods that we've identified. And the one other thing I want to say is that Patrick and I didn't change or remove or edit any of the methods that Sharp identified, but that there might be a need for that. For example, method 11 is records, radio, and television. And I think this is because when Sharp created the list, there was this idea that media was kind of its own tactic, whereas now media is the substructure of really any tactic, right? Either promoting it or facilitating it, whether it's online or offline. So I would argue that there's probably some small changes that can be made, not only additions, but also potentially edits of the methods that were already codified. So yeah, so I look forward to the Q&A, and I invite you to visit the site if you haven't already, and to please share your insights and to help us edit and create this to help advance strategic nonviolence in the 21st century. So thank you.
Good. Thanks, Mary. And at this point, if anyone has a question, we'd ask that you please get your microphone ready, have it set up, and we'll let you know if we're going to unmute you. If you do have it ready, you can go ahead and click the raise hand button that you'll see on that toolbar, and then I'll be able to see that, and I can call on you. I know we have a few questions that were already written in. Why don't I start from there to give you time to get those microphones ready. One of the questions comes from Paul. And Paul asks, what about when the internet and web are blocked? What kind of face-to-face and analog methods need to be used to keep this pressure and to send this message?
Right. So that's censorship. I think you're talking about censorship. You could also be talking about turning the internet off. Basically, how does one get around internet censorship? The Chinese, which is the case that the internet is on, but certain content is being blocked. So the Chinese are actually really, really, really good at this because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of activists, and they have also a very savvy censorship system, the Great Firewall. So what they've done is basically two things. The first is to use images instead of words, because images are a lot harder for censoring software to decrypt, right? So so using images instead of words, because it's going to take longer for them to be taken down, because basically a human being needs to see it and see that it has political content and remove it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is alternative spellings, which it's easier for people, for the government to figure out, okay, they're spelling democracy with a 0 instead of an O, or with a Z instead of a C, and then to take that down. But again, you even might have like a half an hour where people are able to share that word. So it's basically thinking about how censorship is actually happening, and then tactically working around that. So, for example, if it's software programs that are scanning web pages for certain words, then spell things differently, or use even a photograph or image of the word is going to be harder for that software. So you can there's still tactical ways to get around it.
Next question is from Rosalie. She asks, is cyber warfare or sort of hacking or other methods like this, is this included in this enhanced list? And this kind of touches upon this idea of violent versus nonviolent, destructive, if you're destroying versus if you're being constructive. Would you include this in the list?
I think DDoS is in there. I believe the definition on the list is physical harm to human beings. So if it's not physical harm to human beings, then it's okay. In terms of the value of tactics, often hacktivism can backfire because the activists lose legitimacy. People perceive the action as being illegitimate, or as being bullying, or as being violent. So yeah, so I think, that's another thing. The thing is open for opinion. Is hacktivism nonviolence? I think it is, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because of perceptions of legitimacy of the activists themselves.
Okay, I still don't see any hands up, but if you do have a question, we do invite you to go ahead and get that microphone, or you can actually also call in with the telephone. If you look at the audio panel on the right side of your screen, you'll see a little collapsed box where you can get instructions to call in with the telephone. The next question is from Abraham, who asks, what is the best type of digital resistance against dictators in places like Africa, Eritrea, or where the education system or the digital infrastructure may not be as robust and the private press is essentially controlled by the regime?
Yeah. So I make a practice of never offering specific tactics in specific contexts because I don't know the context well enough, and because there are dangers to activists if I give incorrect information. But I will say consider mobile phones. Mobile penetration is much higher in most of the world than internet penetration. So that might be a good tool to think about, but it's basically the way one makes at least media choices is thinking about what do I as an activist have access to, and then what is the audience I'm trying to reach have access to, and then whatever media are meet both of those criteria, then that is the best media to use. But I would really suggest that you need to evaluate your own context in order to determine the best tactics.
Okay. I actually have a brief question. It seems like some of the new methods that you mentioned a lot of them seem to be continuations of sort of older technologies that we've seen. I mean, looking at maps have been around for forever. Things like QR codes, digital file sharing, it's another way of passing secret messages, which has always kind of been in effect. Is there anything from these new methods that you see as more of a revolutionary tactic, something that was never possible, or are these more of an evolution of things that movements have always needed to do to be successful?
It's a continuum. I think it's fair to say that it's a continuum. Even trends in digital activism, things that are new, like ephemeral organizations that come together very quickly to mobilize around something, for example, say the Arab Spring, and then can dissipate as well very quickly. That's new, and yet we could also think of analog examples of a quick mobilization, of quick coordination, and then dispersal. So I think it's fair to say that this is an evolution of things that are connected to things that have happened before, but perhaps are the scale is different. And I think it's also possible that many small changes will create a context that is qualitatively different than in the past. But I don't think we're quite there yet. But good question.
Okay, and getting back to this project, the 198 methods upgraded, is there any sort of time frame you're looking for this to complete it, or is this going to be just sort of ongoing for the foreseeable future? And what do you really hope to gain once you decide it's completed, or will ever be completed?
Right. I hope it will be completed. It would basically be completed when we had something to say about all the methods. I think that would be a good way to define completion. And I guess I should have put this in my presentation, but I think eventually it could be a guidebook, probably in digital and perhaps paper form, that would describe how digital technologies were affecting the 198 methods or the 198 digitized methods or something like that. So the time frame for that is pretty open, though, because it kind of depends on who participates in the project. But that would be the endpoint of having insights on all the methods and then turning it into some kind of informational product for activists.
We have another question from Abraham. He's asking, maybe you can elaborate a bit on this question. How does this categorization sort of relate to different cultures? Is it a universal thing that anyone can use, or do you feel like it has to be adopted based on the field of struggle for the movement?
Oh, it definitely needs to be adopted in the same way that the 198 methods have applicability across a broad range of contexts, but the particular applicability of any given method has to be evaluated. And that is, to my understanding, the difference between a method and a tactic, that the methods are these kind of universal abstract possibilities, and then the tactic is the method implemented in a particular context. So the digital aspect does not change that nature of the list of 198 methods. They still have broad application, but the particular applicability needs to be determined on a case-by-case basis.
And here's a question from Joseph. He's wondering if the results of the research project, will be translated into other languages.
I think probably, I mean, if we got a grant to pay a translator, then yes, we could do that. I think it's more likely that the product would be a Creative Commons license, and that so if anyone wanted to translate it, that I would share the original text, and I've done that with past projects. So it would certainly be available for translation, and the initial translation would probably depend on having with an author funds to support that kind of work. But yeah, it would definitely be an open license, so anyone could remix it in any way they wanted, including a translation.
Another question from Bill. Is there any way to use some sort of decision-making process, or are there any tools to help people pick the most appropriate tactics from this new list for a given circumstances? You know, is there any way to sort of filter down this longer list into a shorter one?
I don't personally have the expertise to feel confident to make that kind of filtering system. I think it would, if I were going to go about that, though, I'd be interested in what the methods of evaluation are for the 198 tactics, and then I would, probably tweak those or in some way for the digital ones. But a system, I don't know, there's so many contextual factors to bear in mind that I could definitely see a filtering system being equally as complex as the list itself. So yeah, I guess it's just kind of being aware of what the tactics are, and then having those in your mind in order to be able to call upon them when a particular context arises. I think is a good way of kind of operationalizing this. So, looking through the content briefly, and then one is in a context where what might want to use a nonviolent digital tactic. You have in your head these possibilities, like, oh, well, I think this will make sense. So I think that would be the way to go about it, probably. And also the information about application and recommendations should ideally assist with that process as well.
Okay. Looking down the list, I don't see any more questions.
Okay.
If anyone does have any final comments or questions, you can type them in, and we'll try and get to those before we end. But Mary, was there anything else? Well, actually, we have one last one.
Okay.
From Rosalie, where should we draw the line between a violent action? For instance, if a hacker affects the resource availability in our networked age, is that, as a risk to life potentially, a violent or aggressive action?
Well, I think you can definitely draw a line at physical harm to human bodies. So however that is carried out, then I would definitely draw that line there. I think the question is, how much further out do you draw the line? So yeah, I think any manipulation of, you know, of physical infrastructure that could harm a person or group of people, then yes, that's definitely violence. One other thing I will say is I will be posting this presentation on my blog, metaactivism.org, and I'll also send it to Jake so he can put it, I don't know if he'd put it on the registration page or somewhere on the ICNC website, so if people are interested in referring to it in the future.
Okay, we do have one hand raised.
Okay.
Peter, why don't you go ahead, Peter, with your question?
Yes, I wondered if there's a collaboration between your project and George Lakey's database of nonviolence cases at Swarthmore.
Yes, I think that George has actually submitted information here. Oh, he hasn't. We're not collaborating with him. I'm aware of what he's doing. So no, I'm aware of what he's doing, but we're not actively collaborating. I would be really happy to collaborate, even if it would mean adding this information to something that he's made. I'm not tremendously territorial about all this, but no, that's not happening at the moment.
Great. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap this up. Mary, were there any other points or any final conclusions you wanted to draw?
No, that's it. Thanks everyone. Feel free to, I guess actually I didn't put any contact information, but I'm mjoyce@uw.edu if anyone wants to follow up by email. And I'm on Twitter, so thank you. And I hope that some of you decide to participate in this project.
Good. And this is actually a very timely webinar. Speaking of digital tactics and strategies, we've actually just launched a couple new exciting initiatives. One of the first things is we just launched an iPhone app. You can go ahead and download this for free. Just search for People Power in the iTunes Store, or you can go ahead and use that link that you see right up here on your slide. We've also just launched an online Moodle platform, which is essentially a learning platform full of resources. It has readings, books, videos, links to other resources. So if you are interested in using this platform, you can send me an email, and we'd be happy to give you a login key that you can use to explore it and to see how useful you'd find it. And a lot of people were asking this question. This webinar has been recorded. It will be uploaded to our website in the next day or so, along with all the resources and the PowerPoint presentation that Mary delivered. And you can find us on Facebook at that link on the left side of your screen. Follow us on Twitter to keep up with all of our initiatives. If you have any other questions you want to ask Mary, go ahead and email us at that email address, webinar@nonviolent-conflict.org, and we will forward that to you. And we're going to have a lot more webinars coming up in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for those. So Mary, thank you very, very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.